House of the Dragon Season 2 Episode 4 The Red Dragon and the Gold. Last episode was a bit more the sparks on the powder keg. In this one, things have settled into the post-Blood and Cheese dynamic, by which I mean this is where the Dance of the Dragons really starts, not just the proxy war we had last time, where the Blackwoods and the Brackens took the excuse to have a go at each other. Despite how much things are heating up, this episode starts slow, with Daemon at Harrenhal. We see Daemon alone, entering the empty throne room in King's Landing. As he walks through the double doors, there's an echoing muffled voice from a figure on the Iron Throne, which slowly comes into focus. I think the voice is speaking Valyrian, but Daemon continues to protest that he doesn't understand. Once we see who the figure is, it's Rhaenyra, young Rhaenyra, Millie Alcock again. I'm really enjoying how Harrenhal is opening up old wounds for Daemon. Does he want to be king still? As Rhaenyra says, it's all because your brother loved me more than you. Daemon's very externally capable, but can he deal with the challenges of his own mind? He has a very typical Daemon reaction to this version of Rhaenyra taunting him, which is to behead her, and he sees the crown rattling on the floor. Rhaenyra hasn't finished speaking though. That's what you've always wanted, she says, the head looking up at him from the floor. He wakes up in his bed in Harrenhal with blood on his hands that disappears when he looks twice. Rhaenyra's last words in the dream or nightmare or vision or whatever it was were, "There's been a raven." Simon Strong is standing in Daemon's bedroom repeating these words. Aegon is on the march with Criston Cole in charge of the army. Are they coming to Harrenhal? Daemon needs to sort this out. He needs to get some troops of his own. He can't just rely on Caraxes. He meets Oscar Tully, the 14-year-old heir to Riverrun. Oscar won't commit to anything because his grandfather is still alive. It's not the Tully way, he says. Daemon has no patience for this kind of family responsibility. Place a feather pillow over his head and speed along your inheritance. Oscar looks shocked. Daemon decides to approach the problem from another angle. Are you here to speak with your grandsire's voice for House Tully and the Riverlands? Oscar says he can't do that. Then you're of no use to me. House Tully is a fish with no head. Daemon then refers back to the Battle of the Burning Mill. Out of the Blackwoods and the Brackens, who was it who declared for Rhaenyra? Is this a test? I kind of believe that Daemon genuinely doesn't know, that he doesn't actually care enough to know who his allies are and are not. They're all just little people to him after all. Also, you've got to wonder, is Oscar going to lose his head if he doesn't actually know? Simon Strong steps in and says it's the Blackwoods that declared for Rhaenyra. Summon the Blackwoods, says Daemon. Over on Driftmark, Rhaenys seeks out and talks to Alan of Hull. She thinks he's quite handsome and his mother must have been beautiful. Corlys sees them talking and walks over. I know who he is, Corlys. He should be raised up and honoured, not hidden beneath the tides. Some more clues to Alan and Adam here, who we'll be seeing more of in future episodes. Rhaenys announces that she's going to Dragonstone. The Black Council is restless. Rhaenyra has disappeared and no one knows where she is. Then we're over to King's Landing and Alicent. Alicent has the dragon statue from Series 1, Episode 2. While she looks at it, she drops it and breaks it, just like Viserys did. Back then, Alicent was the one who got the statue fixed. I wonder who's going to fix it for Alicent, if anyone will. The Grand Maester comes in with some moon tea. This is the consequences of her activities with Criston Cole. The conversation she had with Rhaenyra in the Great Sept at the end of the last episode is obviously preying on Alicent's mind. She asks the Grand Maester if Viserys ever talked to him about the succession. The Grand Maester pleads ignorance and leaves. We arrive at the Black Council. Baela reports what she knows on Criston Cole's army, which is not very much. They're moving at night, they're moving under the trees. The council are treating her and Jace with open scorn. They talk about Daemon at Harrenhal, the political morass that he's got himself into there. As one of the councillors said, there's more disentangling ahead of him than the end of a Lyseni orgy. Daemon's gone radio silent. There's no word from him. The Blacks are in a sorry state, and even they admit it now. Sir Alfred, we finally have a name for one of these people, thank God. The Blacks have no army, he says, no direction. Sir Alfred continues, Rhaenyra is absent. Daemon is absent. They have no instructions. These are the people who are in charge of the Blacks. Then we jump across to Criston Cole with his army in the Crownlands. They've captured Duskendale, they've captured Lord Darklyn and his troops as well. Lord Darklyn won't break his oath to Rhaenyra, so Criston Cole executes him and any other soldier who also won't bend the knee. Darklyn clearly has no respect for Criston Cole. Kingmaker, you're not fit for the White Cloak. Cole says that he's giving Darklyn a cleaner death than he actually deserves. Just before Cole swings the sword, Darklyn says, "Yours will come in kind." Cole hesitates just for a second before carrying out the sentence. This is very reminiscent of Robb Stark executing Lord Karstark. You've got a guy who's really not very sure of himself. We also see Gwaine Hightower in this sequence. He looks like he's been beaten up. At the moment, this member of the Hightower family is kind of just here for Cole to have someone to talk to. He looks like he hasn't done very well in the battle. And then we cut to the Green Small Council. Aegon II is very angry. He realizes he's basically been cut out of all the planning for the war, both strategic and tactical. The Greens are working on isolating the Blacks. Daemon in Harrenhal dealing with the castle itself and also dealing with the labyrinthine Riverland politics. Rhaenyra is being trapped on Dragonstone by Criston Cole securing the Crownlands. Cole and Aemond have worked out this strategy together and are enacting it with Jasper Wilds, the Grand Maester, and Tyland Lannister. When Aegon complains, Aemond decides to teach his big brother a few lessons. He switches to Valyrian and proceeds to give the king an honest assessment of how he's spending his time, hanging out at court and appointing useless king's guards. I love the use of imbecilic lickspittles here. Aegon is very humbled because he realizes he can't really argue with it. After that scene, we see Alicent in her chambers. She was absent from the small council. I hadn't actually noticed until Larys arrives and points it out. Like I've said in my previous videos, the character is basically irrelevant at this point. The plot has moved beyond her. Thankfully, in this scene, there's no foot stuff, and Larys, ever observant, notices that Alicent has been taking moon tea. She comes up with a polite excuse. It's the lamprey pie. Obviously, there's a reason that Larys is master of whisperers. He knows the truth here. But interestingly, he chooses not to taunt or threaten her about it. He actually just gives her some respect. It's a sin, he says, to deny your appetites. We know what appetites he's talking about. She knows what appetites she's talking about as well. Alicent has some history books open. Larys points out that these books were favourites of King Viserys. They move on to the topic of Viserys' intentions. Who did Viserys actually want to sit the Iron Throne? Was it Rhaenyra? Was it Aegon? Alicent responds, the significance of his intentions died with him. Larys is like, yeah, that's pretty much how things are going now. It feels like these two are building some kind of genuine relationship. I don't think we're going to see them getting it on like she gets it on with Cole, but I wonder if we're actually going to see any foot stuff again. Hopefully, those days are over. Back at Harrenhal, Daemon continues tripping out. Daemon hears footsteps outside the door again, like in the last episode. He grabs his sword, walks out the door and follows a figure down the corridor. The figure's got long blonde hair and looks like they're wearing an eye patch. After the figure actually turns round, it's Daemon with an eye patch. Is this the first time that we see Daemon thinking about Aemond? We know that Aemond is a bit obsessed with his uncle, but we haven't really seen much in the other direction. We haven't really seen much of Daemon's internal life, and this is why I'm enjoying Harrenhal so much. He finally ends up walking into a kitchen where we meet Alys Rivers, who we saw a couple of times last episode. Firstly in the dining room, where in the scene where Daemon claimed Harrenhal, and secondly at the Weirwood. We learn that Harrenhal has no maester because the last one fled. Harrenhal, says Alys, is cursed because Harren the Black, the Ironborn lord who built the castle, felled a grove of weirwood trees, and the whispers can still be heard. Daemon dismisses this as idle superstition, but he doesn't do very much talking in this conversation at all. We learn that Daemon's bed that he's sleeping in is made of weirwood. Alys continues the talk about ghosts and curses. "Have you experienced anything of note?" she asked. If I had to choose, I'd say she's trolling here. She knows that Daemon is experiencing things. And if he's still loyal to Rhaenyra, why hasn't he sent any ravens to Dragonstone since he arrived? "It must be annoying," she says, "to have as your queen a girl child that you bounced on your knee." And she offers him a drink to help him with what she describes as his tortured rest. I think an interesting question here is Alys inducing all these dreams, or is she merely managing them? Is she just sitting back and letting the ghosts and letting the weirwoods do what they seem to do with people's imaginations? I kind of prefer to think that all of this is coming out of Daemon's psyche. I think that's the more interesting interpretation. If he's merely becoming Alys's creature, that's a lot less interesting to me personally. He takes Alys's drink and we hard cut to a meeting with Simon Strong and another man. "Who are you?" Daemon asks. We find out it's Willem Blackwood, who we saw in season 1 competing to marry Rhaenyra and killing a Bracken as well. "You summoned me," he says, and offers his troops to Daemon's cause if Daemon and Caraxes will deal with the Brackens. Back in King's Landing, Aegon is presiding over the small council again. This is the scene that pretty much breaks this character. The rest of the council are talking about the practicalities, the logistics of war. Vhagar is expensive to feed. Cole is improving his reputation out on the battlefield. Kingmaker, Jasper Wilde calls him. Aegon cracks. "You bore me," he says, and he storms out. They stand up as a courtesy, and once he's left the room again, they sit down and continue the conversation. Aegon and Alicent fall into conversation, and he talks about his frustrating experience. "The small council ignore me." "What thoughts would you have?" asks Alicent. "I'm the king," he says again, proving that he just doesn't get it. Alicent points out that everyone else on that small council earned their seats. What Aegon should do is be silent and strive to learn from them. And then she delivers the killer blow, in the hope you would be half the king your father was. Aegon warns her to tread carefully. Alicent doesn't have any time for this, and details all the dumb decisions he's made recently. "What should Aegon do?" he asks. "Nothing," says Alicent. This might be a conversation she comes to regret. Then we're back to Cole and the Green Army. They're outside the castle of Rook's Rest. Another important castle, at least in terms of isolating Rhaenyra on Dragonstone. The army are chopping down trees to prepare siege weapons, and Cole decides they're going to attack during the day. And Gwaine is like, "Hey, no bro, we attack at night. We do nothing during the day, right?" And Cole is like, "Hey bro, are you scared?" And okay, yeah, they call each other sir, but like I said before, Gwaine only really exists as someone for Cole to have a chat with. Cole has definitely improved as a character now that he's doing what he's good at. And Gwaine, what's he good at? We're not sure yet. I guess we'll find out in future episodes. Back on Dragonstone, Rhaenyra returns. She walks into the council. Lord Darklyn finds out that his castle has fallen to the Greens and that his father is dead. We now know 2 names of the people on the Black Council. Hallelujah. In another great piece of acting by Emma Darcy, Rhaenyra goes to confront Lord Darklyn, but Jace interrupts. "Where have you been?" Rhaenyra explains what she did in the previous episode. She went to King's Landing, she met Alicent, and I like the way she frames her attempt to do this. She inherited 80 years of peace. She wanted to be sure before she was ready to go to war. So I was not the biggest fan of Alicent and Rhaenyra's scene in the Sept. Overall, I feel that it does make sense in terms of Rhaenyra ticking off all the boxes before she goes to war. But do I actually like the scene itself? Do I think it makes sense that she would reach out to Alicent in particular? Would I like the scene better if she'd reached out to another member of the Green faction? But honestly, who would that be? I kind of still need to think through how I feel about Rhaenyra and Alicent in the Sept. Maybe I'll come back to it at the end of the season. But now that I see it in context, how it justifies Rhaenyra's choice to now execute the war, yeah, I do kind of like that. So the council discuss how Criston Cole is preparing to attack Rook's Rest. Finally, we have 3 names of people on the council. Now, I kind of feel like They're actually characters rather than just filling up a chair. We discover that at the moment, the Blacks have no army on the mainland. I guess the great houses are starting to move, but we don't know about that yet. Jace says it's time to send a dragon. Rhaenyra offers to go, and everyone shouts her down. Jace offers to go, and everyone shouts him down. Rhaenys offers to go, and no one objects. Aelys, she points out, is the biggest and most experienced of their dragons. We're gearing up for the battle at Rook's Rest, and it's montage time. We see Rhaenyra and Jace. Rhaenyra tells Jace about the Song of Ice and Fire, about the prince that was promised, and how their claim to the throne is wrapped up not only with their right as Targaryens, but also with their responsibilities for what's coming from the north. It does feel like the showrunners are very much on Team Black. We've seen a careful construction of Rhaenyra's claim to the throne, along with a careful deconstruction of Aegon II's claim at the same time. While Rhaenyra is explaining this, we see the others getting ready. We see Cole in the forest, we see Lord Staunton in Rook's Rest, we see Rhaenys speaking in Valyrian to her dragon as she gets ready. We see King Aegon getting on Sunfire. Sunfire seems to be the only being in King's Landing who actually likes Aegon. He gives him a bit of a nose bump like he's just a big dog. Tom Glynn-Carney has this huge genuine smile on his face, managing again to humanize Aegon, give depth to Aegon beyond the monster to someone who does genuinely have emotional needs but can't seem to satisfy them. And Sunfire looks gorgeous. We get these beautiful shots of his yellow gold body flying over the roofs of King's Landing. So here we are, the Battle of Rook's Rest, which takes up the rest of the episode. The archers on the walls of the castle are raining down arrows on the besiegers, but we know that's not particularly important. Aelys arrives and starts doing what dragons do. Basically, hundreds of people are dying under the dragon fire, and Cole's response is all is going to plan. Yeah, he does have a plan, but it's a plan that involves hundreds of his troops dying. How exactly is that possible to replicate in terms of an ongoing war? Cole turns to some troops and tells them to send the signal. This means a couple of archers send some fire arrows into the air, which means a guy with a horn blows his horn, which means another guy with a horn blows his horn, and at the end of the chain, we see Aemond and Vhagar in hiding, presumably just waiting to join the battle. Okay, so Vhagar is going to ambush them, but first of all, hundreds of your own troops have to die. Cole is definitely doing better out with his army than he was pretending to be Hand of the King, but I actually feel that this is kind of worse than doing the King's mum. Maybe that's just me. Aemond takes a couple of seconds to talk about what an idiot his brother is, and then tells the dragon he's gonna have to wait. Up in the sky, Aegon is encouraging his dragon to move faster. I think it's an interesting point that Aegon is talking to his dragon in the common tongue, whereas both Aemond and Rhaenys talk to their dragon in Valyrian. I think that's an interesting choice from the script writers. Cole sees Aegon above him, uses it to rally the troops, but also wonders where Aemond is. So let's break this down. Aemond got the signal from Cole. Presumably the signal meant it was time for Aemond to join the battle. But then Aemond sees his big brother and decides to tell his dragon to wait. Why would he do that? He knows that one of the black dragons is going to be out there. If he wanted to help his brother, presumably he would go at that moment. But he allows his big brother to face Aelys alone. Doesn't seem like a very fraternal thing to do. Sunfire and Aegon are completely outmatched by Aelys and Rhaenys. After their first encounter, Sunfire falls towards the ground, dripping black blood on the troops below. He recovers, comes back into the sky, and then gets hit again by Aelys. This is the point at which Vhagar appears. Everyone stops, even the dragon riders, and watches Vhagar, this huge beast. So what Aemond and Vhagar do now is they approach the two dragons already engaged, already dancing with each other, and Vhagar burns both of them. This is ice cold. Aemond is basically trying to murder his brother under the cover of battle. Sunfire, still with Aegon on top of him, falls into the forest, and the forest around them starts burning. Meleys and Vhagar claw at each other, circling around each other, dancing as they fall towards the ground, killing Criston Cole's troops, knocking Criston Cole himself unconscious. And then, as Meleys flies over the castle, Vhagar rears up and chokes Meleys to death. We see Meleys turn to Rhaenys, and they stare at each other as the light goes out of Meleys' eyes. We see a similar thing happen to Rhaenys, who accepts her fate as the two of them drop to the ground together. I'm really going to miss Eve Best. I thought she was fantastic in the role. We see Criston Cole regaining consciousness. Over in the background, someone is attacking the castle. Not sure who. Is it Gwaine Hightower actually doing something for a change? Cole goes and looks for the king. We see Aemond holding his sword in the air like he's about to bring it down on someone. Cole stops him with a shout. Cole's very emotional about the whole situation. Aemond, on the other hand, seems completely unbothered by the sight of his big brother, who we don't see whether he's alive or dead. So it looks like the gloves are off. The Dance of Dragons has started. Thanks for watching.